Okay, we're going to start. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out before the crack of noon. This is the Robert McCammon Q&A. My name is Hal Bodner. I am your lovely host. I'm the substitute for Vanna White. I think the way we'd like to do this, if everybody's cool with it, is I'll introduce Rick. I might, ask a question or two, as we sit out in the hallway. What is horror?
Oh my
what
God.
made you want to become a writer? Where do you see the future of art? Well, that's really in-depth question. And then, basically just open it up to the floor, and I'm just here to make sure, he doesn't pull William Shatner and say, "Get a life!" So Rick was one of the, actually, for those of you who don't know, Rick was one of the founders of HWA, way back when he was just a young man of 25.
Yes.
And it's grown, I guess, in ways and means and to depths that you could never have anticipated.
Imagine. That's right.
I will share with y'all one of my personal experiences with Rick, who I just met, actually, which is kind of great. When I was a sweet young thing, and I was at one point, I found a couple of books at the time. I had found Stephen King's Salem's Lot, and I had found Anne Rice's Interview, and they were really cool books. And actually, I was actually afraid to read Interview because it had that weird cover. And I read them, and it was a very spooky cover, that white cover. And I went nuts, and I really, really liked vampire fiction. And I never had read horror. I was afraid to read Dracula. I was one of those Nelly boys. And the next book I think I was able to find was They First, which kind of turned things around. And years later, when I became an author, I would say that had it not been for you, it would have been.
Oh yeah.
You guys wouldn't have had my stuff.
Oh wow.
So let's just start, Rick. I'm going to ask one or two questions and then open up the floor. But
okay.
You were part of the founding of HWA, and I don't know how many people have heard your kind of of how that happened and why that happened and I'd just be interested.
Well, let me go back in time just a bit and say that I am from Birmingham, Alabama, and there, to say the least, there are not a lot of writers groups in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm afraid to say there aren't. But I began to write at a very early age when I was like in the first grade. I was doing short stories and stuff, and of course I never dreamed I would be able to make a career out of it. I thought I'd be a newspaper reporter, but I felt isolated there, and I knew I was keeping up with some of the other writers through Publishers Weekly or through some other periodicals. But I wanted there to be. I thought there ought to be, and I wasn't aware of all the cons that were going on at that time either, because I was very isolated. But I was thinking, it wouldn't be great if there was like a community for horror writers. We could just get together and talk on a yearly basis, or maybe twice a year. And I wanted there to be a community, probably just really for myself, because I felt very isolated, very, very alone in my situation. But there was another reason that I wanted to put it together. I thought at that time there were some older writers who were in bad health, poor health, and they needed financial assistance and emotional support. And where do you get that sort of thing except from an organization? So I was hoping that it would kind of transform itself into not so much the award. I wasn't really interested in the award. I have to say, the award was not like the main thing.
But it is really cool looking.
It is cool looking.
Okay.
The award is great. The award is cool looking. It's great. It's good and it's super. But that was not the focus of the organization. The focus of the organization was to have a community of like-minded people, like-minded writers, and also there to be a sort of a safety net for older writers in emotional and financial need. But anyway, that's kind of how they came about.
Were you able to accomplish that in the early years?
It became, I had to say, it did become more award-oriented. It did. Just, that's kind of human nature. Became more award-oriented. But, of course, Joe Lansdale and Karen Lansdale did a tremendous amount of work. And I'll tell you a guy who did a tremendous amount of work, and he doesn't get a lot of credit, if any credit for it, is Dean Koontz. Dean put a lot of money into the organization. He put a lot of time into the organization. He doesn't really get any credit. So right now, credit Dean. He did a fantastic job.
Gentlemen, I give you Dean Cooks.
Yes, really, he did a great job. And Joe and Karen did also. I started getting letters and from people all over the country and really all over the world, and it really, I mean, the interest in this was huge. And I guess I didn't, I wasn't ready for all that correspondence. And really, as Joe and Karen stepped in to help with some of the correspondence, and they really took charge of it, because I just backed off of it a little bit. I didn't have time to handle the nuts and bolts of the organization. Yeah.
Now there's been a little. I'm playing Murphy Brown here for a minute.
Okay.
There's been a little bit of you're controversial in a couple areas, and two of them.
Just a couple.
Just a couple. One is, and I actually found this out recently, and I'm very, very upset, is that you're kind of not too wild about some of your earlier stuff being reprinted. And why? I mean, have you been asked this like 3,000 times?
No.
I'm just curious.
No, it's just that, you just grow as a writer. My deal is, and as I had a Q&A yesterday, and I mentioned this, I learned to write in public because I had no trunk novel. So, many writers have trunk novels, and they do a work or two, and it's not really very good, but it's the best I could do at the time. And then they look back and they say, oh my God, I'm so glad those trunk novels were never published, because it would have been awful. Well,
Yours were published. Your Dirty Laundry is out there.
My trunk novels were published. That's not to say that they're not, I'm proud of what they are, because they were the best I could do at the time.
Right.
Best I could do at the time. That's all I can really say about them. But I think people wanted to see how I began, I suppose. But I think those first four, I guess I was beginning to hit my stride with They Thirst a bit, but I think I've become a much better writer. I mean, that's the whole point of writing and continuing to push yourself, is becoming a better writer. But those first four books.
Your historical stuff, I mean, your historical stuff is much richer and fuller, obviously. But I mean, I have a fun, that would have been Ball, Bethany Sin.
Nightboat and They Thirst, really.
And They Thirst, which I love. Now, somebody else told me something, and I got to ask you this. I'm so glad we finally got to meet. Had you been to Los Angeles before you went?
Yeah, I had.
Because
I did a lot of research there, and I met somebody who told me about, we were talking about, there was an abandoned motel, and I said, I was talking to this guy, and he says he was just like a street guy, and I asked him where he lived, and he said he lived he lived in the motel, but he said, but don't go there after dark. He said it was an abandoned motel. I forget exactly where it was. He said, don't go after dark. He says because the people living in the basement are really bad.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I was so impressed because it was Los Angeles. I mean, is anyone here from Los Angeles? The amazing thing in They Thirst is that they get from point A to point B in less than 6 hours. It's absolutely amazing.
Amazing. With a sandstorm going on.
Yeah, with a sandstorm going on. It's amazing.
That's what you call fiction.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, you took a little bit of a vacation for quite a while. What was?
Right.
Did you get asked about that a lot?
I do.
We can skip that.
No. I covered that in the Q&A also in detail. But I will say right here that I kind of ran afoul of when I did Speaks of Nightbird, I kind of ran afoul of an editor at a very prestigious house who wanted to change everything about it, and it would have been horrible. It would have been turned into basically a historical romance, very light, and all the details, all the emotion, all the really heavy-duty work I put into it would have been negated, and I just could not. We just couldn't see eye to eye. So basically, I said, do you really want me to make these changes? I said, I just can't make these changes. I said, what happens if I don't make these changes? And she said, well, we'll publish the book, but we won't promote it at all. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the book. I'm just going to pull it, and I'm going to do another book. And I did, at that point, I did a book called The Village, which is another historical work that's unpublished. It's set in World War II. It's about a young woman in Russia who wants to be an actress, and she gets involved in a theater group that goes out to entertain the Russian troops before they go to get slaughtered by the Nazis. So that's an area of interest for me. But anyway, when that book went out into the marketplace, I had no takers at all. Though an editor at Warner did say that she thought there was one of the most exciting battle scenes she'd ever read in her life in this book. It was about the group gets involved with a partisan group in Yugoslavia, and they have to stop this German armored train from crossing a bridge. And anyway, she said it's a very amazing scene. She said, but you know what? You're a horror writer.
Oh yeah.
That says it all. She said you're a horror writer, and she says your fans are not going to go for this, and you're just not going to find an audience for this. And so I was very disappointed, very discouraged at that point. And I thought, I think my career must be over because I did not want to go straight back to the horror field because I felt like I had done, as I mentioned in this Q&A before, I felt like I had done the basic tenets of the horror field, the haunted house, the vampire, the zombies, whatever, just the basic tenets. I'd done that. And I won't say bored, but I was not challenged by it anymore. I wanted to go and do something else. So this was very disappointing to me that it didn't happen, and I really thought, I'm done. And I'm just going to go home and figure out what to do next. So it took me about 8 years to figure out what to do next. I was called back into writing because a local publisher asked me to read part of This Speaks the Night Bird to a group, and I read it, and they liked it, and this local publisher asked if they could publish it. They published it in hardback, and then Pocket came back, so what's going on, and they published it in paperback, and so I got back into it that way, sort of, kind of, but I really wanted to do something challenging to me, and the historical work is very challenging. Now, I've gotten back to the horror field in a way because of the last book I did, The Five, is supernatural, and that I think is the best book I've ever done. I think The Five is. But I'm going to be doing these historical novels and then doing also a contemporary horror novel, maybe, I don't know, but it'll be something a little strange in between each historical work.
Now your hero, Matthew Corbett.
Yeah.
Oh, I keep pulling this thing off. Now, you've written how many novels with him?
Four. Well, the fourth one will be out at the end of May.
Okay, now this is actually because I keep trying to pick them up, but Speaks the Night Bird.
Are they that heavy?
Yeah, no, it's to tell you what confuses me, and I don't know if this is you or publisher, but Speaks the Night Bird is actually 2 volumes.
It was split into 2 volumes.
But they're both called Speaks the Night Bird.
Yeah, and it's funny, in some bookstores you can find the second book,
and not the
but
first.
you can't find the first one.
Right.
Why they did that, I don't know why they. It's a big, thick book, of course it is, but I don't understand because it just messed it up.
And then it's Queen of Bedlam.
Queen of Bedlam, Mr. Slaughter.
And Mr. Slaughter.
And the next one's called The Providence Rider. The Providence Rider.
The Providence Rider. It's amazing because I envy people. They said when I first wrote my first book, they said, write what you know. So I wrote gay vampires because that's what I know in West Hollywood. But I've always envied people who do research for these things and make them very real. And there are 2 people, Stefan Petrush, who wrote something for White Wolf, and it was set in Islamic lands in like the 15th century. And Stefan said to me once, he said, I had pneumonia and I wrote it in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And I knew nothing about the area.
Really?
And then I watched Lisa, pulling her hair out with research, for things. And then I see you step into the 18th century, or the
1703.
and it's effortless. And I think, are there any kids here? I think, well,
that's the deal. That's the deal. It's not effortless.
But it looks that way.
It has to look that way.
And it's just, how do you live there? I mean, here?
You do live there. Yes,
Okay.
You do. You find out everything you can about the period. There's some things you cannot find out. And I'll tell you, and it's very interesting, there's we're looking at the e-book revolution, digital revolution, but without the internet, I probably could not ever finish these books because as I'm working on them, it used to be ancient times, I would make a list of things I needed to find out in the library, okay? And I would go to the library and find these things out, okay? Now if I came to a point where, I don't know that, I forgot to put this down, I'm gonna have to go back to the library tomorrow. Now, if I had to do that with these historical books, they never get finished because it's like you're working on something and you come across, and I remember hearing about a candle clock. Okay, so there's no clock in this room, but he needs a candle clock. All right, so what does a candle clock look like, and actually how does it look? And I'm also, you have to put in much more detail in these books. I mean, you have to know much more detail than you're going to put in.
Right.
You just have to put in enough to intrigue the reader, but you can't overflow.
It's like sci-fi.
Yeah, you can't just knock them down with details. But you have to know these things, So without the internet, it would take me so long to finish these books. But anyway, you have to make it look effortless, of course, but you've got to do your research. Now, there are going to be some places where the research leads you into a situation where modern audiences are not going to understand what you're talking about. Because in this era, they referred to lunch as supper.
Yes.
So if somebody said, well, we're going to go have lunch, they would be completely wrong historically. But if you said supper, that now refers in some parts of the United States as dinner. Dinner is called the supper meal, okay? So that's a little confusion, so you have to work that out, you know. So there's some things.
Your descriptions of what they were eating at the meal. I mean, I'm an overeater, guys.
You gotta eat, the clothes, carriage, coach, gates of horses, the money's a nightmare. The money's a nightmare because a lot of it was a barter system. You had gold, you had all Dutch currency. I mean, it was a big. How many of this got done? I don't know. I mean, historically, how it got done. How historically anybody went into the woods, the forest, and cut all these trees down to make a town, God only knows.
But that's what your first one's about.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly what. Yeah. The first one is about making a town, making a place. Well, okay. The first one is if you
or just making a town.
If you get into the psychology of the thing, the first book is about making a place for yourself, which is what I was trying to do. I was trying to make a place for myself that belonged to me and me alone, because nobody else is doing anything like this. It's very difficult to do. Nobody else is doing this. Setting a problem solver, a detective in colonial America. And I wanted more than anything to find a place for myself. That is, something that no one in the world could say, well, all right, I've already read this. All right, this is something that somebody else is doing. This is something I wanted, you know. All right, now I ran into problems with that, though, because once you do that, you sort of step out of the genre model.
Right.
There's no genre model. You know, it's like, and also you say, well, you know, what are you working on? Well, I'm working on a historical piece. Oh my God, not history. It must be boring. Nobody's
worse. You could write satire.
Huh?
You could write satire. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, there are some just satirical elements in these books also. The one thing I did not want them to be is boring. So I've got humor in them as much as possible. Humor, suspense, mystery, sex, swordplay. You know, diabolical villains, and I just have the most fun doing this. The most fun doing it. I look forward to doing it. It's light. When I get into the book, it's funny to me. I know the people. I can recognize them on the street. It's my world. This belongs to me.
I think that's what drew me into it. And then we'll open up for questions. Is it's historic and yet, you know, I'm a character man. I love character.
Well, there's some.
You got character.
There's some modern elements. There are some modern elements to it also, in that you know, people don't change that much over the course of time. And Mr. Slaughter is a serial killer that you could probably identify today readily. Right. So there are many modern elements to these, but there's so much fun. And you know, I always think how I react to my work is how the reader's going to react. So if I'm doing something, and I have done this before, I've done this recently on something that I didn't like. So I'm working on something that's like, oh, I don't want to go back to that. But you know, I feel compelled to finish it. No, I'm not going to. But that's exactly how the reader's going to feel about your work. You know, they're going to. It's the same thing. So if I'm thinking, I can't wait to get back to this. I'm so excited about this. So that's what the reader's going to feel, and you just know that. So it's exciting to me to get back into that world.
Well, let's open up. I'm sure you have thousands of questions. Don't anyone ask what the future of horror is or what.
You can. You can.
Yeah. The thing that's a little surprising, and I've kind of read about the situation that you described. When your publisher was reluctant to move forward with these other books that weren't, they didn't feel that they were the horror product that you were famous for, that, you know, best-selling books.
Well, let me correct that real quick. Pocket was going to publish anything that I did. They were going to publish,
but they weren't going to support it.
Well, they were going to support it. The problem came about actually because of Boy's Life. And let me back up a little bit. When I did Boy's Life, and I said this in the Q&A also, when I did Boy's Life, I thought that was the best book I've ever done, and I was really excited about it. And I thought, you know what, when I turn this in, I'm going to get the letter. It's going to say, we're so happy with this, because we didn't really think you could do this. We thought you were basically a genre writer, and you've broken out of the genre. So I expected that. And then I got the letter, and the letter said, you know, Rick, we don't really understand this book, and we want you to cut out all the characters. We want you to make it simplified and make it a murder mystery.
Right.
Cut out everything. So, you know, I just couldn't do that. It was like I'd written this book. I thought this book was really, really good, and I thought it was going to reach and touch a lot of people. And I was hearing that they didn't get me. They didn't understand it. So I thought, you know, I need to find a place where my work is understood.
See, I think that's a fallacy, because writers like Dan Simmons, you know, who wrote books that, you know, the horror readers loved, and then he stepped completely outside that stuff. He had stepped out before with science fiction. He could do science fiction, he could do fantasy, he could do genre horror.
Right.
And then he began writing. Began writing historical novels, and
Sure.
he began writing other things like that. Some that mixed supernatural, and some that didn't.
Yeah.
And we, the readers, still loved it and still read it.
Right.
And so I think that their opinion that when you started writing things that weren't what they thought were your cookie cutter genre stuff, not that you ever write cookie cutter, but I think that they were looking at, I'm sure, as a marketing, publishing viewpoint.
Absolutely, they're looking
Is
for
this going to be a
marketing.
moneymaker? You
Yeah,
know,
that's
it's
right.
like
That's right.
Well, you know, it's interesting
But-
because you in your day,
Yeah.
back in the 18th century, 19th century,
Yes.
You started out as a horror writer,
Right.
And you were there. You know, nowadays we have people like, I mean, as some were talking this morning, Charlene started out as a mystery writer, and she started mysteries, and now she's doing this paranormal. Heather has worked cross genres. Paul Wilson
Yeah.
works in 5 or 6 genres,
Yeah.
and I think that back then you weren't allowed to do that.
I think it was tougher.
Yeah.
I guess, but you know, I was talking to Joe Lansdale about this, and Joe said, you know what, I've never been fit into a genre, and I said, well, that's, you know, he said, my genre is Joe Lansdale, and that's exactly what it ought to be for every writer.
Oh yeah, he
It
said
should be.
to me, I wrote a Western once.
Yeah, that should be for every writer. It should be, you are your own genre.
Yeah.
You know, you do, you know, and it's all really a matter of trust, that the publisher either trusts you or not, and that's the crux of the problem, that I felt my publisher did not trust me.
Yeah.
That's the crux. That's really the problem.
Yeah.
Really, the problem was that, but I felt my publisher did not trust me to do the right thing. And when you feel that is gone, it is gone. You're
Yeah.
done.
Well, they're trying to
So-
pigeonhole you.
That's right.
They want you to produce the same thing.
They don't trust you. Trust your talent. They don't trust your forethought. It's done.
But it's kind of like it's kind of like having to make confession to your priest, who every Friday night you see drunk at the local disco. You know, you lost confidence, and you know.
That's it. You
Yeah.
lose confidence. You lose confidence that you've done the best thing that you think, and then you know they say no, we don't like this. We want you to just basically destroy it.
That must be horrible. It's like killing. It's like killing. I mean, thank God I'm not at the level where you know I have major international publishers who say that. I mean, they're not going to waste time with me. They let me do what I want. But you know, it's in realization that the bigger you get, you know, the more they feel they have to put their fingerprint on.
Right. Right, that's true.
Terribly
That's
frustrating.
true. And these are people who really, you know, they don't really know the creative process. They don't really appreciate the creative process. They are the money people, but they're the power people.
Yeah.
And so that's the bottom line too. They're the power people. Yes.
Sorry, just wanted to clarify. You said that the publisher wanted to change Boy's Life. How did it wind up? It came out presumably the way you wanted.
Absolutely the way I want it to be.
So did you take?
You know, it's so funny. I got this, you know, the letter and said, I got a phone call. I said, you know, we need to change. So it really made me upset. I said, hold that thought. I will be there tomorrow. I had a 2-book deal with them. The second book was yet to be done. So I flew to New York the next day, and the place, you would have thought the place was deserted. Nobody was there. You know, nobody was there.
Rick's coming high.
That's
High.
well, I expressed over the phone that I was very, very upset at this, and I said, you know what? I need to talk to somebody about this tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the only person who would meet with me was, and he's still there, is Adam Rothberg, who was at that time, he was a good friend of mine, and he works in public relations. But he was the only one who would meet with me. And so we went in his office, and he sort of settled me down. And he took what I had to say to, at that time, Erwin Applebaum, who was running Pocket, and basically said what I said: if they want me to do this, I'm going to have to break the contract. I can't do another book for you if you want me to do this. So he took the message. The message was understood. I went home. Everything was fine. But still, I thought, you know, I've got one more book on this contract. And also Erwin was a strange personality. You know, you'd ask to talk to Erwin, and when you go to talk to Erwin in his office about something, there would be at least 6 guys in the office. You could never talk to Erwin. He would never, and he was always like, you know, piddling with something, and everybody else might be listening or might not. You just felt like you weren't being listened to at all. You felt like, you know, I'm trying to express my opinion in a constructive way. You were not listened to. So anyway, that all went into the mix of mine.
Now, you did the second book, or you did?
I did do the second book.
And that
Second book was
was?
Gone South.
Gone South.
It's
Gone South.
kind of like that textbook example of book packaging and marketing too, because if it hadn't been Pocket and it hadn't been, you know, in that train, if it had been Knopf or something like that, you probably would have been up for all kinds of awards. I mean, it's a classic piece of American literature.
Well, see, that's right, because Pocket is at that time, and it's probably still true, basically a paperback house.
Yeah.
And they think of things in that narrow area. And so, you know, when you're straining to break out of and you're ready to break out. You're ready to break out. I don't necessarily want you to break out. You're doing well. You're making a lot of money for them. You know, you just feel like I've got someplace else to go. Oh, no, we don't really want you to go. And I felt that. So, but anyway, when I got involved, and I got involved with Viking. I was, you know, this Speaks Nightbird, and they were offering a lot of money to do this. Scribner made a big bid for it also, but Viking made a huge bid. And I thought, you know, I really arrived. And this was like it was difficult for me because Viking is like, you know, at that point it was like the temple of publishing. You know, the marble floors and the place is beautiful, and you know, everything was like geared to the writer. And then I ran into this editor there, and it was like brutal to realize you're not going to be able to work with this person, and it's so close. It's so close to happening that your dream of being with this huge, beautiful publishing company who will put a lot of support behind you and push you, and you know, it's blocked because you're not going to be able to get past this editor. And I asked my agent, I said, is there any other editor I can work with there? And she said, no, there's not. No, there's not.
Now, how did your agent react to that? I mean, agents, you know, agents.
Well, she was. I have to say, she was friends with this editor, and so there was a little difficult. She just wanted me to do the work.
Even with
she
Boys
was-
Life?
No, but with Speaks Nightbird.
Right, but I mean earlier when she was with Boys Life.
No, she was on my side.
Okay,
She was on my
good.
side. But the thing about Viking is, she didn't understand why I could not do the work, and I mentioned this also in the Q&A. She didn't understand why I couldn't do the work, and I said, you know, the things she wants me to do are just ridiculous. I mean, she didn't know anything about the period. She wanted to change all sorts of things. She wanted my hero and the heroine to fall in love the minute they met, and the woman has been bathed in a bucket for 5 months. They're not going to fall in love the minute they meet. And I told her this, and she said, but I want it to happen. I want it to happen. You know, it's just not going to happen. So my agent at that time said, I guess what really is going on is that you want more money. Is that right? You want money? I said, no, it's not. I don't want more money. I want another editor. Can we find a, she says, I know that you want more money. She kept on and on and on. And finally, in exasperation, I said, okay, yeah, I want more money. And I found out later she went to Viking and told them I want more money. And they kicked me out of there pretty quickly. So that was another thing. You know, you just get, I thought all this was about just writing.
Oh, you naive little child.
I was. That's exactly right. Because I was sheltered in Birmingham. I didn't understand the business. I thought what you did is you did the best you could do in terms of writing. I had no idea that you got to deal with politics, with egos, with people who got upset if you didn't return a phone call within about an hour or so.
Well, you know, Rick, at the risk of insulting you,
Gotcha. Go ahead.
you were always about the work in the early days even. I mean, you were writing
I was, yeah.
because you had something to say.
That's
I mean,
right.
you were doing it in a horror milieu, but you were...
Yes, I thought so. I think so, and I think that, you know, I got a review from a guy in Italy, and he said, he said there's a lot of politics in my work. And I realized there is a lot of politics.
Yeah.
There's
Social
a lot of
politics.
There's a lot of social
Yeah.
politics.
Yeah.
It's social politics masked as a horror novel. Some of this is. But, you know, I don't think my publisher ever really understood that.
I mean, you look at Nightboat, and I mean, how can you miss that?
Oh, yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
it's like,
well, you know,
boom,
this is
it's there.
Well, that's one of the ones of course, learning.
But I love it. I just love it.
A learning tool, but anyway, yeah. But the deal is, yes, I felt like I had a lot to say, and I felt like my publishers really were not helping me say it. In fact, they were hindering me in a way because they kept me in this box, and I wanted to do more, and I felt like, well, again, Pocket said they wanted me to, they were going to stand behind me with Speaks Nightbird, but I just felt that they really weren't. You know, they said they were, but actually, very soon after that happened, all the people at Pocket, for whatever reason, and there's a tide that flows in and out of this business, and people will, whole groups of people will leave. They'll be gone, and new groups of people will come in, and ebb and flow. So soon after this happened, the entire group of people I worked with at Pocket left. The only person that remains there now that I've worked with was Adam Rothberg, as a matter of fact. But everybody left. So would I continue to get support there? Probably not. Probably not.
But you could have waited around at Viking for a new editor to come in.
Well, you know, right. But that, yeah.
Let's go for any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah, Rick, I wanted to just ask you about, You change the location and lights out the McCammon newsletter. I guess Hunter
Yes.
Oakley did a
Hunter.
Q&A with you
Yeah.
regarding They Thirst.
Right.
You apparently wrote it in Chicago during a snowstorm.
Exactly right, it was set in Chicago.
What were the
first.
problems? How far did you get with
I
They
counted about
Thirst?
100 pages, and I thought, you know what, I'm limited by just Chicago. I mean, Chicago's a great city, not taking anything away from Chicago, but I thought, no, if you're talking about eternal youth, creatures who strive to be eternally young, you got to put it in Hollywood, got to put it in LA, got to. So that's why I did about 100 pages of it set in Chicago. But God knows whatever happened to that now. I have no idea where that is. So I had forgotten about that, as a matter of fact. Thanks for bringing me that.
How many commitments have you made like that and had to throw that much aside and start over? Is that the only time?
I've had 2 novels that I began and did about 200 to 300 pages into it and decided they weren't any good. One of them is very much like, and this, I'll tell you the reason I stopped doing it, because you guys watch American Horror Story? Okay, it was like that. It's called The Address. It's about a house in Hollywood. And it's about a house in Hollywood and what happens to the house as it goes. It's about the history of the motion picture business. And it's the house is an evil presence or not, depending on who died there. But it's very much like American Horror Story. But it was so grim. Oh my God, it was grim. I mean, it was not a place where I wanted to go to. It was too grim for me. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. But it was interesting. I went to Beverly Hills and I went actually to the street that I set this house on, and there was the house.
Oh, wow.
There was the house. It was like a Spanish or Mediterranean Spanish-looking house with a green awning in front. And I described the green awnings. I described the green awnings, and the house was there. It was there.
We have all the Middle Eastern oil barons, and they put
Yeah,
up columns
yeah,
now.
yeah, I
It's
know.
gone.
Sure.
Completely gone.
Yeah, but that house was there. Then I did another one called The Lady, and this is kind of where the character of the lady in Boy's Life came from, and she was like the voodoo queen of New Orleans, and it was going to be her life story. And it was about her mother was also a voodoo priestess, and she was destroyed by another witch they called the Red, La Rouge. And anyway, it was going to be this woman's little girl as she grew into an older woman, her search to avenge her mother against La Rouge. But then I began to read more about voodoo, and I began to understand more about voodoo. It was basically a way to sublimate black people, you know, who were terrified of this religion. And I thought, was it fair? I didn't really know. I didn't know whether it was right to do to make the woman actually, you know, have supernatural powers, or actually to do voodoo as what it really was. So I kind of got confused as to what I ought to do. But it's really a good story because my little girl had a friend who was a snake, and called a sister. And actually I use sister again in Swan Song, but sister as a s, right? And she could talk to the lady, and her deal was she hated humans because humans had killed her children, but she loved the lady, and they traveled together. So I think that would have been good. But it just didn't work out. It just didn't work out. I had something else to do. So yeah.
In the back.
But Chris?
Yeah, you said you felt like you had sort of hit all the points in horror
Right.
that you wanted to do.
Right.
Are there any points that are still out there that maybe you thought at one time you didn't want
Yeah,
to do?
there are. There
Yeah.
are. You know, you just sort of getting a little distance from where I was. There are some combinations of things that I've come up with, you know, and there's some things that, you know, I'm really kind of more interested now in the human horror as opposed to supernatural, and so I'm going kind of in that direction. Though the next book I'm going to do is I'd say supernatural. It's more science fiction than supernatural, but there is a supernatural element also. But yeah, I have. And pulling back, I've seen some things that I'd like to go back and do. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that for me, Boy's Life is probably the one book I recommend to readers above all others. This isn't a question, by the way.
Okay.
And also, it's the one book that the people who have read it, it's invariably in their top 5 books of all time.
Right.
So I just wanted to thank you for standing your ground and writing the book
Well,
that the readers wanted rather than
Well, the amazing thing about that book was it almost immediately kind of translated across very many ages, and I began to get letters from kids and letters from elderly people, and it really did translate across a lot of ages, which was good. It amazed me because it wasn't written for kids, and it wasn't written for young adults. It was written for, you know.
No, it captures that magic. Very few authors have managed to do it, where they can appeal both to the young reader and readers who are
Older-
in advanced
older.
age.
Oh, I
And I
think, yeah.
certainly, my aunt read it, she was 55, 56,
Yeah,
I think, when
yeah.
she read it. My nephew read it, 13, his favorite book of
There you
all
go.
time.
How about that?
It's a magic, wonderful piece of
Thank
work.
you, thank you so much, I appreciate that. Yeah.
That boy's life question too, as a matter of fact. I think my favorite part of the book is where you're talking about when the young protagonist stays over at his friend's house and they've just seen the Mars
Right,
invasion
Mars,
movie.
yes, right.
And how did you manage to make that? How did you manage to link that with the alcoholism metaphor? Because that is so. I read that book 15 years ago. I said that goosebumps. Like that was amazing.
Yeah, well, that's the Mars movie that scares everybody to death. The thing that has, at the end, there are two versions, and one version has the young boy looks out the window at the end and sees the entire thing starting all over again. And that really affected me. But so I wanted to pull that in there, but I wanted it to be like, this person does have like the X on the back of the neck. They do have something wrong with them, but it must be something that is a little deeper than the Martian takeover. And how this would affect a young boy. How would it affect a young boy to hear his father, to see his father go into this condition and say these things to him? Say these things. Must be so horrible. So he becomes an alien, right then he becomes an alien to his family, an alien to his son. And so anyway, that's kind of how that is.
It's genius.
Thank you.
It's genius.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Now this is something that's interesting. In today's world, a lot of the popular writers, especially genre writers, are doing series.
Yeah.
You have the same characters. You had a whole career before you launched on
That's right.
a series career.
Yeah.
So what? How did that happen?
Oh, the series.
Well, I mean, that
or-
you came to it so late. I mean, most people.
Well, again, I wanted. Okay, well, yeah, I wanted to do something that was totally mine. Nobody could say, well, this is elements of this writer, or this writer's. It's mine. So when I finished Speaks Nightbird, it wasn't supposed to be a series. It was going to be a one shot.
Right.
But I thought, I really like this character, and I could do a lot with this. And I'm going to do a lot with it. There's a lot involved in this story, and there's a story arc that connects all the books and characters from the first book are going to show up in the fifth. It's like writing one long book is what it is. It's like writing one long book.
And you never wanted to do that before?
I never wanted to do that before, and I never did. And I've always been fascinated by this era, this era that combines, well, as all eras do, great civility and great brutality. I'm fascinated by this era, but I wanted to make it appealing to the modern readers. And that's kind of one thing that hurdle I had to get across with the publishers is that it just didn't sound like it'd be that interesting.
Oh, the moment you said historical, I'm sure the faces went.
That's right, exactly
Yeah.
right. Because we're also focused, or publishing business is also focused usually on the now. Okay, but what I wanted to do is create a world in which you didn't have to worry about cell phones. You didn't have to worry about get away from that for just a little bit. Get away from cell phones. Get away from everything in modern life that we all understand, we all love, but you know what? Sometimes these things just knock us down. We can't see life. We can't see life and experience life and enjoy life except through these things. And the idea that you couldn't get anywhere in this area unless you walked or rode a horse, or if you wanted to communicate with somebody, you sent a letter, and the letter may be 2 or 3 weeks or months getting to where it needed to get to. And just how did you live? How did even the idea of lighting a fire or striking a fire was a challenge. Striking a fire in a wind was a challenge. I don't those experts still don't know how it's done because it's done with tinderbox. How you strike a fire in a wind, I have no idea. But anyway, just getting away from our era.
Well, it's interesting
appealed to me.
because nowadays, I mean, technology is advancing so quickly.
Right.
That if you write a book in 2010 or 2011
Yeah.
or 2012, we all know that by 2016, 2018, it's dated.
It's dated. I mean,
And
really
you've kind of
Yes,
took the
right.
run around that,
did.
and you're not dated at all.
I wanted to do that. That's one of the things I really wanted to do, because I saw my work being dated. I saw
Right.
my older work being dated. In fact, there's a thing in Gone South where you have to make a phone call, and he's worried about somebody going to tap his phone, and it's like, now you got caller ID.
Right.
So I saw my work being dated, okay? And that was one reason I wanted to do this also, is I didn't want the work to be dated. So the way to do that is,
300 years ago, 400 years ago.
Right. So you understand. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay.
Just one more question. Obviously, we've all like read and loved your novels and love all the work you've poured into these historical books that are so rich. And but you know, speaking for myself, I'm still a huge short story fan.
Okay.
And Blue World was probably one of the greatest story collections I think in the genre ever, and
Thank
still
you.
love to read it. Do you ever like sneak off from the giant, massive work of the books, and do you still plan to like? Have you written any other short stories, or you ever plan to kind of revisit
Well,
that?
you know, I did a sequel to Wolf's Hour
Yes.
called Hunter from the Woods. That's short stories and novellas,
Okay.
and I had such fun doing that because I could finish a short story in a shorter period of time, go into something different, and that was so much fun for me to do. I haven't done, you know, mostly I focus on novels. I was doing a novella here just recently that I didn't like because I realized that, well, it's too dark for me at the moment, and I realized the novella is not my form really, but it's you know, the novel is really my form. But I had such fun doing Hunter from the Woods that if I have a chance to do, well, actually I have a book coming up with novellas and short stories based on Matthew also. The next book in the Matthew series is going to be short stories and novellas. It's called 7 Shades of Evil. After I finish this new one, which is called River of Souls. But anyway, yeah, I think I'll get back to that at some point. I just have got a lot on the plate right now in terms of novels and stuff.
I forgot you wrote Wolf's Hour. Now
Yeah.
that was Germany, right? In that period.
Yes, yes.
Now correct me if I'm wrong, because now it's, I mean, a lot of people do werewolves and the Nazis. You know?
Oh, yeah.
But you were, I think, the
I
first.
think I was the first.
How did I mean, you, ladies and gentlemen, the man created a trope.
So,
How did you make that connection? Because it's done a lot now. I mean, it's.
well, I wanted a hero. You know, I wanted the guy to be a hero. I wanted to be a James Bond type hero, and I thought, you know what, you know, I wanted to be. I thought it could be Russian. It could be and have his roots in the aristocracy of Russia. And I thought, well, where would he go from there? If he's a kid in Russia during this time where there was a purge, he would be a young man in the time of Nazi Germany. And so that just worked out. I needed to come up with a plot, and it just came together like that, you know. So he's a fascinating character. I love that character.
I forgot you wrote that. That's one of my
I like the
favorite.
character. So getting back into into his life, and the first story in this short story book covers when he leaves the forest. Actually, he leaves the Russian forest and gets involved with the Russian circus. And then the final book, the final story is when he's an older man. He's in his 40s. He's all beaten up. He's been through quite a life. And his last assignment has been to disrupt the weapons manufacturing family called the family of Silver Needle in Japan. And so what happens is 3 ninjas come after him to kill him in his at his home in Wales, and that's the last story. It's called Death of a Hunter. But he doesn't die. He doesn't die, but he does change in a way that is unexpected. So I think I probably will do a 3rd book in this series. I'm going to tell you that his son reappears, and he probably will do a book with he and his son teaming
I
up.
love that in the train car.
The train car, yeah, the
That
train
that
car.
was I read that the first time. I said, God, I said, you know, I love Dr. No, the book.
Oh yeah,
Because it
yes,
was-
that's
but-
exactly right. That sequence and series of torturous experiences he goes through.
And I thought, this is
That's
so
exactly
cool.
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that's from. So
Yeah.
so that's fun to write. You know, and the deal is that a lot of this is so fun for me to do. It's fun to write, if it appeals to me in that way, it draws me. It's fun to write. And I'm thinking, you, the reader, you know, you're going to have fun with it. You're going to have fun with it too. Yeah.
So we have about 15 more minutes. So there was a question right there.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any of your books optioned out for film, and if
Yeah,
you're
they're-
opposed to, you know, somebody changing
Well,
your work.
The Wolf's Hour is optioned out. Wolf's Hour is probably closest to being filmed of anything I've got. I think mine is optioned out.
I always thought mine would, you know, it's such a
Yeah.
fast pace, it's like a chase scene all the way through.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
It seems like it would translate really well.
Yeah.
You know, visually.
Well, it was a movement at one point, and then the studios backed off from it because it was a woman protagonist. And basically, the idea now is that, you know, the main ticket buyers are young teenage boys, and they don't necessarily want to see it, you know.
Well, Wolf's Hour is going to be Ryan Reynolds and Beyonce, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. There you are. So, but anyway, there are a few working. But you know, I don't hold my breath about that because my children are my books, and these children would be the children of other people. They might be totally different from what I've written. So I just have to be happy with my own children. It'd be great if it would happen. Yeah.
Was Stinger ever optioned?
No, that never was option. Never was option. Never was option. No. Unbelievable. I agree with you. Unbelievable.
You know, but it's interesting. Those Chris, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that any of those big epic.
Yeah.
And there is an epicness to Stinger. I mean, King sort of later became optioned for TV mostly.
For TV mostly, yeah.
But I don't think
Yeah.
any of those big epics were optioned. Because
Yeah.
they're too expensive.
They're too expensive. Well, actually putting together mine, I understood it was going to be about at least $50 million put together, because you have to do a lot of CGI work with it. So that's going to be very expensive. And then they had the unknown of the woman protagonist. It didn't put them all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing a screenwriting thing later on, and it's a couple of screenwriters and then me from the
Yeah, okay.
studio point of view.
Oh, okay, sure.
That's going to be
Sure,
fine. Yeah.
sure.
No, too much money. Too much money.
Too much money. Anything can put it up, put the project off. I mean, any little small thing can put the project
Oh,
off.
yeah.
Anything. So it has
Well,
to
they
be
pay
like
people to say no.
They pay people. Sure, they do. Absolutely, they do.
Kuntz has this wonderful thing. It's in the end of Twilight Eyes about having an option for a film and
Oh, yeah.
and what he went through, and it's very funny and running away screaming.
Oh, yes.
in terror
Oh,
from his
terror.
people. Yeah.
Right. Sure.
So you're lucky you don't have to do that.
Well, I am very lucky. I'm extremely lucky that I was ever able to do this, because I never thought I'd be able to make a living at this. And sometimes I look back at my the time that I spent walking and smoking cigars and figure out what I was going to do with my life. I look back and I say, why did you do that? And when you were depressed and everything. But I think, it gave me an insight into myself and gave me an insight into my career. And it also made me understand that I'm called to do this, because I was called back. And even though I walked away, I was called back. So there must be something ahead for me. And I think there's a lot ahead for me. And it's exciting to think. I'm very pleased to be where I am. I'm very pleased to have gone through what I've gone through. A life is a life. You go through what you go through, and you take the first step from wherever you are. And that's life. And I have a lot to do. I'm very, very excited to be here and very excited to be still writing.
Oh my God, that's like perfect tagline, but we still have more time.
It was too early.
Get your exit lines in order.
A little editing is needed here.
These questions and comments have all been so wonderful and intelligent, so I have to ask a really dumb fanboy question that's
Okay.
been obsessing me for years. Usher's Passing was one of my favorite books. Did you enjoy writing a writer character and a horror writer?
Yes, I
character?
did.
How much
Yes, I
of
did.
Rick's
I did.
He was in Rick's.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I grew up on a large estate. My grandfather owned the first department store in Birmingham, and he was wealthy. And I was raised by my grandparents, and I had a very wealthy upbringing, and had a huge house, huge estate. My grandfather was a brutal type of man. He understood nothing of me. We had horrible arguments, and it was terrible. And he wanted me to go into the family business, and I didn't want to. He said I would never amount to a damn, worth a damn. Part of me also is in Vernon Thaxter. It's the same thing, that I was useless and worthless, and if I didn't get into the family business, I would have no future. He also said to me that no one would ever hire me if I had a beard. which is why I like to have a beard. So anyway, yeah, we just didn't get along. So a lot of that is in Usher's Passing with the Usher and Rick's, and a lot of that also is in Vernon Thaxter and Boy's Life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Usher's Passing was I actually reread that not too long.
That's all
It's
good.
really interesting.
Yeah.
I moved into a house and nothing was unpacked.
Oh.
And I'm a voracious reader. I love to read.
Yeah.
And the box that I opened happened to be some of your stuff.
Oh, well, okay.
And I reread it less than a year ago.
Wow.
And there's a weird creepiness.
Is
to
it,
that
well, I
book.
hope so. I hope so. Yeah, well, I toured the Biltmore Mansion also, and the Biltmore Mansion, there's a picture on the back of that book of the Biltmore Mansion. And enthralled by the Biltmore Mansion, enthralled by the money that went into that, by the power that went into that, and that actually started me thinking, well, who else could have done this? And then it just came, Edgar Allan Poe, Usher family, Carrier Mom, see where they, and that just, how do these things happen? I don't know how you get these ideas. I mean, Chris,
Psychosis.
I don't know how you get these ideas. How do you get these ideas? I mean, they just, where do they come from? It's a mystic thing, I think. And, you get this question of where do you get your ideas from, and you just don't know. I mean, the other day, I was looking at a newspaper, I happened to see the name of a lawyer. His name was Adam Dredd. What a great name that is. What can you do with that? I mean, who could Adam Dredd be? So go with it. You know, where does it go? Follow it. And it'll take me a while. But I'll come up with something. I'll come up with Adam Dredd something. And there's a town in, I was just exploring this a little bit. There's a town in Alabama called Belle Ellen. It was owned by very wealthy people. And there were coal mines there in the early 1900s. And the coal mines were dug out by convicts. Because there was a prison in Belle Ellen. Convict labor went into these coal mines, and the wealthy people in the town who owned the town, they got all the benefits. There must be a story there. I know there's a story. There's nothing left of Belle Ellen now, but it's out in the woods. It's just a few, ruins and wrecks. But there must be a story there. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm going to work at it, and it's going to work with me. And sooner or later, it's going to be a story.
You'll get it.
Yeah.
Are we done? Okay, great. All right, let's take one more, and then Vaughn, and then we're done. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask a Sandra a question.
Okay.
There was a little snippet of an article in, I believe it was the horror show once, where
Okay.
there were little paragraphs from sequels. And
Oh.
yours
Oh.
was from They Thirst, and it
Oh,
was
I
Countess
just-
Bathory saying the bite of life heals all wounds. And was that just written for that, or is that?
I think
something
it's
that might
fine. I think I was
someday
playing. I think I was playing with it. But maybe I did have it written down somewhere. I had a thought to do a sequel. But I've got so much to do. I really got a lot to do. And I think, some of these things like the Hunter from the Woods was so much fun to go back to, but I have so much to do ahead. And and it's so gratifying to me to see all my older books, and people, of course, bring the books to be signed. And some of them are in tatters, which is great. It means they've been read. Some of them say, they've gotten them from the half-price bookstore. One time I opened them up, there was a dead roach inside. They said, oh, I'm sorry about that. That's okay.
The Dead Roach Chronicles by Robert McCammon.
I love that. I love that possibility. But so you see the pages of your work yellowing. You see your pages of your work. That means it must be old. The books are yellowing, and you say, "Gosh, have I been in doing this that long that your work is yellowing before your eyes?" But I'm very excited about the future.